Started off as a PG podcast, but then Devin just kept on dropping shits and fucks, and now...
That's right. We are live.
The ghost faced himself, Brandon Hanev.
This isn't like the start of last season when it was just, it looked like the Canucks were just a beer league team not playing defense at all. And just before Chris goes, no, I'm kidding, Chris, you can actually go now.
No, hold on.
We had to give more time for coming on late. So.
I still had, hold on. All right. Chris, go, and then I got something else to say at the end.
So, an elf and a midget in 2 back-to-back games. Yeah, he's definitely on a friendship tour for sure.
Think, oh yeah, I'm okay with him being, the 6'7" defenseman. No! He is a AHL defenseman right now.
Look, Shonky, don't mind Devin, okay? We all struggle with Devin, so you know.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks, as well as Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. And of course, subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. On a Tuesday instead of a Monday, because sometimes getting people together can be like herding cats, and it can be a challenge, but that's okay. We're all here. We've got Tyler here. Hello, Tyler.
Hello, Kevin. Hello, Sean, and Brian as well. It's it's kind of my fault that we had to push this back a day because of softball getting in the way from last night. So
hold on, Tyler. I wasn't available last night either. So
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not.
Don't wear it all yourself.
Yeah, Tyler is our athlete of him and Devin.
Athlete, yeah.
I was at Modest Mouse, so.
Oh, there. See, a concert as well. Sean, what were you up to last night?
What was I up to last night? Oh, I was watching WWE Raw.
He could have done a podcast.
I could have, but then I would have missed the return of Johnny Gargano, and you could have watched. Wouldn't have been able to watch Edge at his hometown. So yeah, it was a really good episode. And as long as we this is the only time we mentioned the hot dog straw from the Yankees game, I'm good.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that is. Yeah. By the way, just we'll introduce our guest here in a moment. Here, we'll introduce Brian in a second. But I gotta tell you, I think Edge needs to be called out a little bit. Mr. Adam Copeland. He's selling these Toronto Maple Leafs shirts last night. Apparently, he is not a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. He is a New Jersey Devils fan.
He's both.
Okay. His trunks last night certainly looked a little bit more New Jersey Devilish than Toronto Maple Leafs.
Calgary Hitman, actually, which was
that's true.
Cool.
Yeah,
I think it's because he was in Canada.
You got
white. Come on. You could say they were Detroit Red Wings, garb.
Yeah. Anyway, Tyler loves wrestling. But our guest is he is the program head at BCIT Radio, the owner of BCL.
Hold on. Whoa. BCIT Radio Arts and Entertainment, Kevin. It's what it says on your diploma.
That's true. Okay. Let me do this again.
Just off to a roaring start here.
I'm just off to a great start with my former instructor, by the way, the program head of BCIT Radio Arts and Entertainment, the owner at BCHL Network, the general manager of the Panthers, the BCHL media.
No, hold on. Pacific Junior Hockey League. It's Junior B.
I'm sorry. Good thing I went through this with you before.
Yeah, my bio is extensive.
Yes, a contributor at Elite Prospects, co-owner of the Junior Hockey Journal, and of course does media for the Vancouver Open Tennis and BC Super Week, as that just ended. When did that end? This week?
So the tournament's not the Vancouver Open, it's the Odlum Brown Van Open. It wrapped up on Sunday, actually.
That's right. Odlum Brown Van Open. If you click on the actual Twitter, then it just shows that there. Anyway, I'm off to an awesome start.
A lot of people, and you know what? You're just as a lot of people make the same error where they assume that the Van in Van Open is short for Vancouver, but the tournament name itself is actually the Odlum Brown Van Open, so it's not really short for anything.
Okay.
There's also there's a golf tournament called the Vancouver Open, so like we try to eliminate any confusion by not having the exact same name.
And then as well on hiatus, but the BC Superweight Week Pro Cycling Series as well.
Yeah, that's too bad it's on hiatus. Hopefully back next year.
Yes. But Brian Wiebe is with us. Hello. How are you after all of that? How are you doing?
I'm deeply hurt and offended, but I'm fine. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm just so proud of that diploma I'm staring at right now across my room. Anyway,
I think it's more of a reflection on me than you, Kevin. So don't worry about it.
Oh, it's probably me. We have Brian joining us. It is the two markets that we cover extensively, the Vancouver Canucks and Calgary Flames, are in a very interesting time in their sports radio history in terms of the coverage of the two teams we follow, the Canucks and the Flames. The Flames have one more year under Sportsnet in terms of their radio rights. The Vancouver Canucks, as an article was posted, and Brian was interviewed by Patrick Johnston about what is going on with the Canucks and their radio rights. And there's been a lot of questions about that. We're not going to specifically, we may touch a little bit specifically on where the Canucks may end up in the radio realm. We may not. But we wanted to kind of delve into the sports radio industry and what is going on right now in terms of a lot of new things. Of course, also this week, Sarah Orlesky is transitioning her role as a reporter from TSN to join True North with the Winnipeg Jets, and will be doing media there. She's already interviewed Mark Scheifele. So, and we have Natasha Stanisevsky, of course, has joined the Calgary Flames, Calgary Stampeders media team. So we're seeing a little bit of a transition here. And was someone going to say something? Nope. Okay. Where I wanted to kind of start is the relationship between team and broadcaster. And I think Brian and Tyler will have, and we'll probably have some interesting insights. But and I'll start kind of where I, as a play-by-play announcer for the Greater Vancouver Canadians, kind of look at this, and then we can kind of break this down here a little bit, Brian. As a play-by-play announcer that broadcasts teenagers, I find it a bit difficult, or I do not, as a principal, criticize a player's play. If a goalie doesn't make the save on a play, or a defenseman misses the puck, that audience I know is mostly parents and family that I'm calling the game for, and everyone there can see that. Now, when you look at the Vancouver Canucks, and one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up is there's a perception with the in-house radio model that as an example, if this Vancouver Canucks decide to go in-house with their broadcast, or the Calgary Flames do, that there would be less criticism. As a instructor, and also, of course, as a general manager, and even with the BCHL network and with the BCHL, what are you discussing with broadcasters right now about how to criticize, or if you should criticize players? Like how are you approaching that?
Well, I think it all comes down to what's fact. And you know what? If a goalie lets in a goal from center ice, that's a bad goal regardless, unless undeflected. Like if nothing else happened and a player, just lofted it at the net and the goalie straight up missed that shot, what are you going to do? Like, are you supposed to say that was an unbelievable shot? Like, to me, that's lying to your audience. And so ultimately, in my mind, you have to call a spade a spade. And I think it's one thing to criticize. It's another thing to pile on. And so I think it's okay to say that was a bad goal, or that was a bad giveaway, or that was a play that player probably shouldn't have made. And I think even at the level that you're calling at U18 AAA, like I think in the BCEHL, I think it's okay to say that, because if any parent or family member or friend comes up to you and says, "Oh, I can't believe you said that about my kid," well, they're fooling themselves. because guess what? Bad goal is a bad goal. Like, I'm sorry, but like that kid made a bad play. Now, if you're like, can't believe he made that play, what an idiot, that's different. That's not okay because that player's not an idiot. They just let in a bad goal. Like, it's totally different. And so I'd say that at the NHL level, it's exactly the same. Where I think the difference lies is when you have emotion in your voice, especially as a play-by-play announcer. So again, it's not criticism. It's the fact that, you know, on a Hockey Night in Canada broadcast, and Jim Houston was probably the best at it before he retired, is when you were watching them, and people out west would disagree, but for the most part, when Jim Houston called a goal, he sounded just as excited for the team that scored, regardless of who it was. Regardless of, like, a lot of people would say, well, he got extra excited when the Leafs scored. And it's like, you know what? If you listen to Jim Robson critically over the years and over the season, he'd be just as excited when whoever the Leafs were playing scored. So, but that makes sense. That's a national broadcast. It makes complete sense. When I was doing color commentary in Merritt in the BC Hockey League, on the Merritt broadcast, our play-by-play announcer and I would definitely have extra excitement when the Centennials scored, because that's our audience. Does that mean, and we watched some outstanding players, Troy Stetcher played in games that I called. Like, that's not to say that if Troy Stetcher made an unbelievable play and like went end to end with the Penticton V's and scored a sick goal, we weren't going to be like, V's score. Because he just made an incredible play. Like, that's an exciting play. Are Merritt fans happy that he did it? No, of course not. Are we going to like go bananas like we would if Merritt scored an overtime winner? No. But would we paint that excitement? Absolutely. So I think that that's what it comes down to. You're there to call the play, and you call the play as you see it. Can you get an added, little bit of added oomph when the team you're calling a game for does something exciting? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just you know, I'm with Brian on all those points. I've had the opportunity to do some commentary in sports radio at the university level and in the BCHL on a few occasions as well. And you know, the approach that I always took was, it's not our job as a home team broadcaster to be cheerleading the home team and you know, being against the other guys like the fans might be, but you do need to be supportive and understand who the audience is. They need to feel like you're on the same page and you want the same goals, but still get a degree of credible, honest commentary, you know, through the radio as well. So, you know, the example of the goal from center ice, I mean, you got to call a spade a spade. Now, do you need to go on about it for 3 minutes and say that the guy's lazy or doesn't care? I mean, no, I mean, that's getting presumptuous, right? But, you know, if you call it like it is, you know, I think so. You know, if it's the parent of the goalie, maybe they're going to have a hard time, you know, flushing it for a little while. But for the most part, they'll come to realize that, you know, they're getting a good broadcast when they're being told the way that it is, and that's the way that people should go forward. But yeah, that's where I think the balance is. It's, are you cheerleading? Are you rooting for or against? Or are you just being supportive, right? Like, I think TSN, you know, they work very hard at the World Junior Championship and put on all the games, and I think a lot of times their people go out of the way to try and sell how objective they are. But at the end of the day, when Team Canada is playing, they need to be a supportive broadcast. They don't crap on the opponent, but they need to be a supportive broadcast, and I think they find that right balance usually.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do when emotion wise when you're trying to call Mason McTavish stopping the puck on the goal line. You're gonna show that emotion and be a little more homerish than you would maybe ideally like. But yeah, for me, I think the big question, and I think that a lot of fans are worried about with an in-house model, is not necessarily the play-by-play and the color. It's the pregame, it's the intermissions, and the postgame on how critical the hosts can be in that aspect, because I think we all know that Vancouver Canucks fans, and especially the vocal ones on social media, are very critical of everything, and they want to see the same from media.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. If you're gonna. respond
Well, I
to
was
that.
just going to say that, like, I mean, if you listen to the broadcast on Sportsnet 650 over the last few seasons, since the station has had the rights, you don't hear an overly critical pregame, postgame, and intermission right now. But then again, fans often and very often have rose-colored glasses on, and so you get this sort of, and then you get this other side where there's a group of a fan base, and there's a group of every fan base like this in professional sports, where the team can do nothing right. And so you get the side of the team can do no wrong. You get the side of the team can do no right. And so I think that's why a lot of people, when TSN 1040 went off the air, were worried about Sportsnet's coverage of the Canucks in the Lower Mainland and BC, in the fact that they were like, okay, well, a segment of the fan base already looks at Sportsnet 650 as house radio.
Mhm.
Like, it's already seen that way. And so for those that are that skeptical already and go, 650 is house radio, like Brendan Batchelor will never say anything bad. You know, when Joey Kenward was on the pregame show and stuff like that, they never say anything bad. I think that there isn't, like, I think that a lot of that is perception and not reality in some cases. Like, if the Canucks make a bonehead move or a questionable signing or trade or something like that, those folks will still talk about it as if it was a bad idea. Like, if this contract sucks or whatever, like, I don't think you're going to hear them sugarcoat that. They'll question that. And I say that, I mean, I know both of those gentlemen that I just named, and I know how professional they are. And I know they'll call a spade a spade. Like, I know that for sure. And same thing on 1040. Like, I don't think that anyone on 1040 went, we don't have the rights, so we have to crap all over the Canucks now. Like, I really don't think that.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, I remember hearing Corey Hirsch being very critical, not overly critical, but he never, when someone wasn't playing well, he would mention someone is not playing well. He was pretty direct about that. But I think that what the other confusion, just to build on Sean's point, is in-house and that relationship between the broadcaster and the host radio. So what is sort of that expectation, and what is that relationship like? Because is it, is there a sort of, does it depend on market in some ways in your mind, or does how is that supposed to look like in terms of what the expectation in terms of being critical or being overly praiseworthy is?
I think it definitely depends on market, without a doubt. Like, I know there are markets in the US, in hockey and outside of hockey, where they have an in-house broadcast or media team, and their job is to sell tickets. Their job is to sell hats and shirts and jerseys and whatever. Like, they work for the team. So straight up, like, if you're going to be piling on that organization, is that going to sell more shirts and hats and tickets? It's not. And so as a result, it comes down to the almighty dollar. And it's like, the name on the paycheck is the organization. And so as a result, that's you toe that company line, unless the team has said the handcuffs are off. Go ahead and do whatever you feel is fair. And that's the key word. As long as it's fair, you can be fair and unbiased and still be on a team's payroll, provided they're cool with that.
To me, that's the gray area, though. Like, that's pretty shaky ground to start wading into, because what is fair is very subjective, right?
Fair is not subjective at all.
Yeah. So,
like, sorry, you give up a goal from center ice, you call that a bad goal. That's completely fair.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
the team loses 9-1. You can't sugarcoat the fact that the team played crappy when they lost 9-1. Like, they lost 9-1.
So where I'd kind of maybe counter that a little bit is when it comes to the topic of officiating. We see very, very often in, broadcast to broadcast, different levels of sports, there's more discussion around officiating, and sometimes more soapboxing about it, or more blaming that or using that as an excuse. So that to me, I would love your comments, Brian, on how much you think a home broadcast, should get into discussing the officiating, and what kind of challenges that would present on the broadcasters in terms of their credibility. Because sometimes it does come across sounding like a bit of a whiny fan, but other times it's legitimate. There's some bad calls, or they've had a rough night, and that needs to be pointed out.
My rule of thumb is, and I tell this to students, and I adhere to it myself when I'm on the broadcast: stay away from officiating. Like you legitimately, like, sure, if you notice like a guy is like, eye out of the socket bleeding and a high stick, you see it on the replay and it's not called.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's fair to say the officials missed the call because everyone can see that. But if you take out that opinion and like leave that to the team, like, again, players play. If you're on the broadcast, you're there to analyze. I get it that you're there to analyze the whole game, but I don't necessarily like leave it to fans to deal with the officiating. Like you're on a broadcast, whether you work for the team or not, you're not a fan. Yeah. So let them go bananas on social media, let a coach say something after a game or a player and get fined. Like, to me, it's just not even your place to speculate on injury or to talk about officiating. Like, and I shouldn't say not talk about it because it's part of the game, but my point is to immediately go and make it sound like it's an excuse for a team. Like, if you look, like, if a goalie gets bumped and the officials didn't call, then there's a way for you to say it and couch it such like, maybe the officials missed the call there, but maybe they didn't. You know what I mean? Like, the game happens so fast, so like you can give the benefit of the doubt yet still say like, hey, here's what I saw, and I think maybe they missed a high stick, maybe they missed, like, because maybe you're wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's and so this is how you phrase it.
Yeah, I think if you're recapping or you're talking about the game, I think if it's part of the story of what's happened, it has to be included, but it's finding that right line, right, as you're saying, and wording it correctly. A questionable call, I think saying that is, there's nothing wrong with that. It's as you said, if it's fans, and Tyler knows this about me, I go off all the time about officiating in our
go wild, right?
I usually try to do it in private chats because like just let everyone else go crazy. But if you're telling the story, if it's part of the story, yes. But if it's just a missed call, a game, and it would like nothing really of note happened before or after, there's nothing that needs to be. It's finding that right balance of telling the story as opposed to just moaning about something.
Yeah, I don't find hockey broadcasts for me to be a big issue with this all the time, but baseball, the sport, is just brutal. I mean, and maybe it's just because there's so many games and so many balls and strikes being called, and eventually the announcers do kind of start veering into a level of analysis on the officiating that you have to kind of roll your eyes at sometimes. But that's some good advice for some young broadcasters. I mean, if you can avoid talking about it, that's safe ground to be on. But sometimes, the way the game unfolds kind of necessitates a little bit of discussion about it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going back and just thinking back to the Blake Coleman non-goal in Game 5 of the Battle of Alberta and how that was handled. And then, I mean, I thought it was pretty well. I think is handled it as objectively as one could handle it. I thought that was, I mean, overall pretty professional. I mean, the emotional part of me would probably have said, and I still think that should have counted, but I thought that there was a really fantastic debate, and that was completely like that was in the fabric of the game, and you had to discuss that, and just give your perception and your opinion. And there may have been people out there that would have thought that Craig Simpson, former Oiler, would have been biased one way or the other on in terms of that. And I don't know if I could come away saying that Craig Simpson was overly biased towards the Oilers or not. I like just from a professional broadcaster point of view, I never really thought or saw it that way. I don't know what, but that was just an example of what you're talking about is, nobody's calling the officials out. People are discussing whether or not that was a goal or not. And there was one of the best debates on Hockey Night in Canada about whether or not that was or not.
And with that in mind, I know there's been a lot of talk about having the officials available to the media in some way or another, is that something that you think is would be good going forwards, or something that I think you think that would be maybe leave it be?
Yeah, might
Yeah,
introduce
I
some
mean,
new problems with that.
yeah, I don't. I mean, again, if I think of the people who I know who work in media and myself over my experience, if they trotted out 4 officials in front of me, I don't know if anyone would have any questions. Like, to be honest, like, because again, it's like we've seen it before. The best games that happen that are great to watch are the ones where the officials are invisible, because that means they're called a good game. And so it's like, you don't want to ask the officials any questions because that means they've done a good job. And so there's going to be nights where, yeah, hey, here's the referees and the lines people. Any questions? No. Okay. Well, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that. So I mean, really, only when stuff gets stirred up do we want to trot them out? No, that's not fair either. So I'm not sure that it's a good idea.
See, as a guy that has put the referee shirt on, I mean, it's, I think that those games where the referees are invisible are the games that are easy to officiate. That's why the refs aren't noticed. I mean, there's other games where they're constantly dealing with the teams pushing the envelope and forcing the referee's hand to make a difficult call. And more often than not, they're the right call. But when it is debatable, and if you're into the subjective nature of officiating, sometimes you get people that are in broadcast positions starting to blame those decisions for why a team won or didn't win. And that's why I kind of bring this up, and what the challenges that creates for a broadcaster, especially if they are working for a team or at least on a team's own broadcast package.
Well, and I think it's great that you say that, Tyler, because I mean, I have an interesting perspective in that regard, but I guess mentally, I always have it in the back of my mind, because when I'm at a Port Moody Panthers game, I mean, I work for that club. I'm the GM of that team.
Mm-hmm.
And do I think the refs are always against us? Absolutely. Like, I for sure feel like the calls aren't going our way.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm so much more invested than when I'm covering the BC Hockey League or I'm watching an NHL game. Like, I don't have that same level of investment. And so it's much easier for me when I'm a media person to take a step back and really sort of see things in a bigger picture than when I am super emotionally invested.
Yeah.
And my clarity is clouded a little bit because of the team that I'm supporting and work for. But again, I think that if you are on the payroll of a professional team and working in their media department, on a broadcast or whatever, I still think that you're not as invested as, say, a general manager is, or a coach is, or a player is. Like, it's a different level of engagement for sure.
So bringing this back to what, the possibility of teams bringing their radio broadcasts in-house, and an example in Canada right now is the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They're doing an audio-only streaming webcast thing. They're not on a radio station anymore. So, yeah, like right now, perception-wise, like the Canucks broadcasts are presented on Sportsnet by people that work for Sportsnet. And even though you could say they're very, supportive of the Canucks, and some the real cynical people could go so far as calling it house radio, you still look at them like they work for the network. Whereas, if the Canucks do bring it in-house and some form of Canucks TV creates the radio broadcast or whatever, I mean, they already produce content on their website, features and stuff, really, really soft, or, not hard-hitting sports journalism necessarily. But that's where I think we have some questions as to, how those perceptions might change and how fans might, treat the credibility of the product. I mean, is there really going to be a difference? I don't know. But perception-wise, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there will be, like I said earlier, that segment of fans that will absolutely say, like, there's a segment of fans that will go on social media, and if something the Canucks do make some bonehead play or signing or trade or whatever, they'll be like, oh, there's no way that on the radio broadcast they're going to talk poorly about that. Like, that'll happen before they even get a chance to hear what the company radio says about it. And that's just that segment of fans that you're never going to please regardless. So it doesn't matter. Like, again, it doesn't matter. Like, the Canucks could win 5 Stanley Cups and those people be like, why didn't they win 6? Like that kind of stuff. And so I think that I mean, you're not going to please everyone. And so I think that the perception will be there for sure. But again, I just think there's just so many different segments of the audience that are totally different. There's some that will get it. There's some that won't. There's some who won't care at all. There's some that it'll be live and die by this. And it's like they have to sort of figure out which segment of that they want to cater to. Is ultimately what it comes down to.
So, Kev, I got a couple more I want to squeeze in before we get to other bullet points on the agenda here. But when the rights moved from what was then TSN 1040 to Sportsnet 650, I remember there was some comment from somebody representing 1040 that they had put together a credible bid for the rights, and they didn't get the rights again. And that raised the question for me: did the rights move over simply because of money, or in your opinion, would the editorial direction taken by one versus the other maybe have been a factor?
The short answer is no. I think money talks, and that's what it comes down to. And the one reason why, if 1040 put together a more lucrative offer than did Rogers, the one benefit that I can see, and I have no intel on this, so I don't know for sure. Is the fact that, I mean, look how many properties in the NHL are with Rogers already. And so I could see that potentially playing a role in terms of, reusing resources and like multi-purposing content and stuff like that. Like that's the kind of thing that I could see maybe might have been part of the equation on top of a competitive financial offer in that case. But I don't think the fact that 1040 was overly critical would have had anything to do with the Canucks being like, we don't want to be on 1040 anymore.
Yeah, and then maybe I'm just seeing what I want to see and hearing what I want to hear. I'm willing to admit that, but it sure felt like towards the end of 1040's run and the Canucks were not doing very well at the time. So to be fair to those guys, they were put in a position where they have to be critical. But boy, when the rights moved over, it did feel like the tone changed quite a bit, at least from what I was seeing. But maybe that's because I was looking for that. I don't know.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I didn't get the sense that was the case.
So then also last one here, Kev, is staying on a topic of money, the fact that there is no radio rights deal in place. I mean, we're at August 23rd today, and like the season's around the corner. In 2022 and the economic situation that everybody's facing here, are the Canucks not? Is it possible that Canucks are just not getting an offer in terms of total money for a radio rights package that they expect to get, and they say, well, maybe we'll just go the route of producing it ourselves, or is that a possibility? Because that's pretty stunning to think that could be the reason why they're not on the radio.
I think that's a possibility, given the fact that the Canucks have a preseason game in a month and 2 days, means that time is running out, and the easy thing to do is to go back to 650. Like there's an infrastructure there. Like that's super easy to say, yep, fine, we'll bite the bullet, whatever the money is, status quo, like let's go. Which kind of sucks for 650 because, as I mentioned when I talked to Patrick Johnston of the province, like it's hard to plan generating revenue from selling a radio broadcast of play-by-play a month before your first broadcast. Like it's almost like 650 is where it is when they launched, because that station launched with not a lot of time to go before the NHL season started. And so like I want to say it was probably 2.5 months or something like that.
It wasn't even that. It was a month. I specifically it was Labor Day 2016.
Okay.
It was very quick, yeah.
Yeah.
So to build that from the ground up, it's almost like they're back there again because they have all this uncertainty, at least appears to be uncertainty, whether or not they're doing the broadcasts again. And so for the Canucks, they're going to have to get their stuff together super quick if they know they're not on 650 and they want to offer that. The other flip side is they just go, you know what? We've got Shorty, we've got John on TV. Let's just throw that as our audio only feed. So that makes it super easy in the fact that it's just a straight simulcast.
And that was one of the things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted because the Blue Jays did it over the COVID. well, we're still in the pandemic, but when was specifically they were in Buffalo/Dunedin, it was both. Is that something you could see working? Because part of my question right now is how much are fans listening to the game on the radio in our market, like in specifically Metro Vancouver and in Calgary? How much is that like we're turning on our TV to watch the game as opposed to listen to the radio?
So, well, that's two questions, really.
I understand
The first,
yeah.
the first being, can it work? Just taking the TV broadcast and putting it in an audio only format. And my answer is unequivocally no. I hate it. It drives me crazy. And I mean, any student that has had me in their class knows how much it pisses me off, because it's a huge middle finger to the listener, not the viewer, because the viewer doesn't know the difference, but to the listener, it is an absolute, like, we don't care about you. And I've talked about this in class here in Vancouver. And I mean, I know people that work there, so I'm not at all crapping on these people personally, but the Global News Hour at 6 is simulcast on CKNW 980. And you'll hear Sophie Louie and Chris Galis, who are the anchors on Global News at 6, say things like, you can see here in the video where this truck ran into the tree. Mm-hmm. Guess what? I'm listening on CKNW. I can't see that truck at all. So it's a huge FU to the listener to just take a TV broadcast and chunk it onto the radio. And sports is no different, because there's, like, you can say, oh, you can see the ball there is outside, or you can see that shot just missed the net. No, I can't. I can't see that.
And even the individual news stories, like on radio, if you do a voiceover, you will introduce or say the name of the person who's about to talk. But on TV, you just rely on the graphic a lot of the time.
There's a chyron, really, exactly, with the name of the person, their title, and it's like, there's this random voice just coming out of nowhere. I have no clue who this is. Like, so to me, if they want to do it effectively, you need to basically rethink the way that you present a TV broadcast as well. And take out all the visual references, because you can't do it.
So there was a time we had some technical issues with our TV broadcast, and I had to do the play-by-play. We had audio, no TV. So I had to literally call the game as if it was the radio. And it's it's two different skills. It is completely two different things. Describing this on the radio, which people like Jim Robson and Peter Marr Rod Phillips were absolutely fantastic at, and what Jim Houston and what John Shorthouse does now, Rick Ball, what they do on the TV, those are two fantastically different skills that you absolutely cannot blend. Like, and especially in hockey.
Like, the fact is they have, because every single person that you mentioned has done radio too.
No, but what I'm saying is I don't think I'm agreeing with you that you cannot do a radio and a TV broadcast together. It's impossible to, like, you're going to lose one of the two audiences.
But it saves money.
It does.
Yeah, that's why we have you on, Brian, to tell us we're wrong and that it's not heading in this dangerous direction.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess one of let's talk about money, and then we'll get into the deeper issue here. What are the corporate sponsors talking about?
Wait, hold on. Can I answer the second half of your question? I just realized you asked me two questions.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
So, like, are people actually listening on the radio? Well, I think for, like, the 55 plus crowd, absolutely. I think for people who work, like, in a vehicle all the time, or work at, like, a job at, like, a gas station where they can't sit there and watch the game, absolutely there's a captive audience for an audio only broadcast. I think there definitely is. Because listening to audio is definitely a less intrusive experience than is watching video. Like, guess what? If your boss walks in and you're watching something on your phone, your boss is going to be ticked off. But if you've just got the Canucks game on or the Flames game on while you're working away, no problem, provided you're allowed to listen to it. Mm-hmm. So that's, to me, like, the total difference. And so, again, I think, and like, to answer your question, like, in a succinct way, Kevin, like, you are absolutely risking losing that audience altogether. Now, does that audience care as much as someone like me who knows the nuances of working with audio does? Maybe not. Like maybe they don't. Maybe they just care about like the fact that did Canucks or Flames score a goal or save a goal, like whatever. Maybe they don't care. I don't know. But to me, there are certain people that are like, there's no way you can do it. It's incredibly insulting to your audience.
Yeah. So, and in today now, like there is a form of, so now the question is, if you're the team, do you need the radio station per se, or can you deliver that audio only broadcast just over the internet? Right. I mean, now you can put that on in the background as long as you have internet access and it's reasonably affordable to leave that thing running for 2.5 to 3 hours. Probably better audio quality than listening off particularly an AM signal, but even an FM signal, streaming is going to deliver a better audio signal than off of FM radio. So the question is now, on radio, it's available for free. Yes, it's not entirely free streaming, but affordable for most people. Would a team sort of like balance the two and say, well, if we lose a few people off of the traditional radio, and it's still cheaper for us overall to provide this audio only content ourselves on some streaming service? Is that a possibility for the team?
Of course it is. Yeah. Absolutely. And some teams have said that. But the fact is that, you brought up an amazing point there, Tyler. The fact is that what's the beauty of radio is that it is free. Mm-hmm. And sure, there's commercials, but guess what? If you have a free Spotify, there's commercials too. So it's like you watch YouTube for free. There's commercials there. In fact, you pay for YouTube because you use your internet or your data.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's not really free. And so yet the radio is completely like, all you need is this thing to listen to it, which every car has almost, except for some of the newer ones. And it's like, or if you talk like those people that I talked about that are stuck in these jobs and whatever, well, they're not going to stream a game on their phone. Like, and you're right, you use your data. Like, sure, data plans are better and better, but like, we know what the economy is like. We see the price of gas and we sit there and we go, all right, I'm trying to cut corners wherever I can, save money however I can. If that means I'm not using, and I get that audio doesn't use as much data as video does on a mobile device, but still, I could see a situation where people may just choose not to listen at all. Like, they might just have the radio on at their workplace or whatever and be listening to whatever radio station or satellite radio is piped in to their workplace in that case.
On the money part of this, then, how would corporate sponsors respond to the in-house broadcast? And one of the reasons I'm asking that question is, I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school, that we know that one of the reasons, and I remember the day we did the TSN broadcast, that I was very angry, and Tyler was very angry, but gave us some real good resolute that the fact that the ratings at TSN 1040 were not good. And we can, I'm not telling tales out of school that Sportsnet is not at the top of the ratings chart right now in terms of where we're at.
Well, now hold on. There's some context there.
No, I understand that, but
like, there's a huge amount of context there. TSN 1040 was actually doing pretty good.
Well, what I was referring to though is like in terms of all of the stations in the Vancouver market.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay, but hold on.
And now, that makes me, how are those business decisions made? They probably look at where CKST was near the bottom and say, we don't want to do this anymore.
Like, those ratings are, and I mean, I use them in class. Like, I refer to them, but I couch it with this huge caveat that, because according to Numeris, which does the ratings for radio, an adult is 12 plus.
Yeah. And
so when you look at those ratings and you see that near the top is like CBC Radio 2, Move 103.5, CKNW, that is adult, male, female split 12 plus. Where in the hell do you think sports radio would measure on that? Pretty damn low. Mm-hmm. So looking at the makeup of the four folks here on this call, the demographics of TSN 1040 was actually doing quite well. Were they still losing money? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did they have high salaries for the talent that they had? Absolutely. Were those folks paid, were they paid what they should have been? Absolutely. So I'm not like all of those things can be absolutely true, but 1040's ratings, yes, in the overall market, were terrible. So same with 650, but there's also other stations that, you know, only do well in sort of like a middle-aged woman demographic that are way down at the bottom too, yet they do quite well. That's so I'm just saying, like, you have to really take it with a gigantic grain of salt that those ratings were like the margin of for 1040, the margin of error was pretty slim, but they could have done okay. They could have made a go of it with the ratings that they had.
And you did a thread, just we'll go on this rabbit trail for a second. I know you did a thread around sports markets, cities with two sports stations at the time that some of them were actually smaller than the Vancouver and were surviving and doing quite well in the States too. So
Sorry, Tyler, I wasn't trying to crap on you there, but I just know like the ratings are such a fool's game when you look at them big picture like that. It's just not accurate.
I maybe the way I'll word that is the higher up corporate people probably wanted to see better ratings in some way from sports at TSN.
Okay. Sure.
So looking at this from a corporate sponsor point of view, how would they respond to an in-house broadcast? Would they respond and say, might be an interesting idea, that there would be better ratings? Or is this still something that we need to test?
I think all a sponsor cares about is two things. Will it get customers to their door? And will they appear as supporting the organization? And I speak from experience, because when we were selling our Merritt Centennials broadcast in Merritt, there were businesses that never advertised on the radio with us, ever, except for on the Centennials broadcast, which told us they're not advertising because they think that someone's going to hear that all of a sudden and be like, hey, I'm going to go to that business because, they have something to sell me. They were there because they wanted to be seen as supporting in a public forum, the Merritt Centennials.
Yeah.
And like they'd even put that on their commercial. Like it would say, we've been in business 50 years, proud supporter of the Centennials since 1974 or whatever. Like they wanted that to be part of it. Now there were others who were like, you know what? We sell hockey gear, we sell, pizza post game. Then they would want to be on the broadcast because they're like, our audience is the same. Our customers are the same audience that's listening to a game.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a corporate sponsor, Kevin, like it'd be exactly the same way. So is there, and again, talking about money, is there a potential that the Canucks could gain some of that sponsorship? Sure, maybe. But when the Canucks are the biggest game in town, or the Flames are the biggest game in town in Calgary, I'm not sure that, and the Canucks, since they haven't been doing so well, and even the Flames, when they were into a downtime, it's harder to sell sponsorships for sure. But it's more difficult to sell sponsorships on a radio broadcast than it is for the overall company of Canucks Sports Entertainment or the Flames. Like that's just an easier sell because you've got a bigger audience. So I think that some corporate sponsors would drop off altogether. Some would continue to advertise with the radio station because they see the benefit to advertising on the radio. And then others would jump to the in-house broadcast. If there was one, if it wasn't a simulcast.
Mm-hmm.
How much is this? Jim Rutherford had a pushback towards the media on Donnie and Dolly. Brad Treliving this summer with the whole Matthew Tkachuk, Johnny Gaudreau move pushed back towards the media narrative and challenged that. How much is this perception of how the media is portraying the team and feeling in a sense that we need to change the narrative, and if we have it in-house, we can control the story?
In my humble opinion, zero. Like okay. I don't think it has anything to do with it whatsoever. I think it all comes down to the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. They were only going to be able to control the one platform, right? They can't control the print media. They can't control the other competing media.
They can't control the 5,000 podcasts. Like, no, it's not going to happen. Like That's
Yeah,
just not
the
like,
amount of
no.
content that is out there, there's no way to control it anymore. Maybe back in 20 years ago they could.
Yeah.
But I think now with, you've got, if they go in-house, like fully in-house audio on Canucks.com and all that, you're still going to have your sports radio. You're still going to have your Sakaris and Prices, your Donnie and Dollies, the numerous amount of podcasts, let alone all the print media and written media that's out there. Yeah, there's I don't think there's any way to control the controlled narrative anymore unless you own everything.
Like, I don't know, if you bring it in house thinking that that's going to be the case, then you have your head in the sand. Like, you're completely naive in thinking that, because it's just not going to happen. You're going to control one outlet, which you already do anyway, because you control your own social media and website and like their YouTube channel and all that stuff. Like, but you're telling me, like, if, just use an example, if like Jay Janauer, the sportscaster for Global TV, if one of the Canucks is like a jerk to Jay Janauer and they say, we're never going to talk to Global again, and I'm just using that as an example, then what's Jay going to do? Jay's going to go on Twitter and be like, those jerks Canucks have revoked all access. Here's why, blah, blah, blah. I asked a fair question. Like, immediately there's going to be like a take sides thing here. So it's not like they can all of a sudden just be like, we're going to revoke your access, and then someone like Jay Janauer is going to go away. Like, no, it's not. In fact, it's going to look even worse. So you're better off keeping it behind closed doors. You say like, hey, Jay, we didn't like that question. Like, you deal with the media relations in that regard. It doesn't go public, and everybody moves on and goes, we're professional, and this is the way that it is. So no, I don't think it has anything to do with any sort of editorial freedom whatsoever.
I don't know if this is fair to bring this up or not, but
it's not.
The cynical among us will note Francesco Aquilini. He does not appear in the media very much. It's not typical for owners to do that. Often when they do, it's a bit of a losing game for them. But on his Twitter, he has taken the odd shot at the media. And so if that's coming from the top in that organization, is it reasonable to wonder about this a little bit?
I think if that's coming from the top, then it's almost like, well, knowing Sean's love of wrestling, I think that it's very similar to, like, if you're a smart fan, then you know what's going on. Yeah. Like, if you know that's coming from the top, which if it's like blatantly obvious that it's come from someone like the owner, and then you hear it or see it, then you go, that's why it's come from the owner. Right. And I use WWE as a perfect example. Like, the change in product since, Paul Levesque has taken over from Vince McMahon, that's not by accident.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way anyone's going, well, Vince should have just done that. Like, no, it's because Vince is gone. So same idea, like that there's been change at the top. So if it comes from the top down, where Aquilini says, hey, we've got to sugarcoat everything on the broadcast, then I would hope that anyone listening would be smart enough to go, okay, this is truly a house broadcast, and I need to take it with a grain of salt. Like, I know that everything is wonderful and rosy, even though they haven't made the playoffs in 7 years. Like, it's like, it's not wonderful and rosy. And I
think at the end of the day, most of what comes across the Twitter is just a bit of a knee-jerk emotional response, and a tweet here or a tweet there doesn't really reflect the overall philosophy from the Aquilini group. But that is out there. There has been the occasional shot at the media, and so that's to me why I think fans are somewhat justified in wondering about this.
Well, I think that's fair. Like, I think for him to take that shot, like, bud, you own the team. Like, go for it.
Yeah. Everyone's allowed to have an opinion, especially on Twitter. Yeah. And you're allowed to dig in into the trench as much as possible. And when he does that, he's just the same as any other fan out there. Yeah.
In this group, we salivate for the Francesco Aquilini one-liners after gritty win.
Good win. Well, he's like me with the Port Moody Panthers.
Yeah.
right? Like again, I'm emotionally invested, and he's even way more invested than I am. You know, he's not an employee of the Canucks; he owns the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think one of the other things that happened, and I think, you know, we discussed this during the Jim Benning era, was there was, in my mind, there was far too many leaks coming out of that organization. Like, you literally, the Alex Edler negotiation was literally done on in public. Like, we heard it from one insider or another what exactly the ownership was off or management was offering, what Edler wanted. It was pretty much, and I think that was one of the jobs that Jim Rutherford had to do, was close some of the leaks within this organization, because it became a lot in my mind. Just, it became like you could get whatever information that needed to came out was coming out. And I think Rutherford has done a nice job of just saying, we need to cut that down a little bit here.
Are you asking me? You want my comment?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, yeah, everyone. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like, is it one of the people who's left the organization, or has it come from within, whether it's Jim Rutherford or someone who was already there, to have said, like, we need to put a lid on this? Again, we'll never know. We'll never know for sure the truth. But I think you're right in the fact that, like, sometimes that kind of stuff can be really detrimental. And sometimes it can be helpful. Like, you really don't know. Maybe you want to gauge the reaction of people. But I mean, really, like, if you're relying on your fan base to make those decisions for you based on their reaction, then you're probably running your business the wrong way. But that's what's weird. That's what's weird about sports. And I see it, to be honest, like, and I'll use Evolution at BCIT, Kevin, as an example. Evolution has two sets of customers. The one set of customers is students, because those are customers of BCIT. Like, they pay to come to school. Then the other is the audience of the radio station and the Evolution Storytelling Company, which is all the social platforms and website. So there's these two customers that you're trying to please, right? And one doesn't pay anything and one pays a lot. Canucks are the same way. Like, they've got players that they need to keep satisfied, because you want to present this image of coming to our organization and well run and chance of winning and all that other good stuff. But then you've also got this fan base that you're trying to please as well, that is also your customers. So you've got two customer bases technically in that regard, and it's hard to balance and please them both. And only the really good organizations that we've seen, like the Tampa Bay Lightnings of the world, have been able to achieve that.
I'm glad you raised that point, because that's not something that you hear talked about very much, and people don't really think about, right? Like, the average fan looks at it through a prism of, you know, it's just them that matters, and not really all those other factors that you pointed out.
Yeah. So we've seen Sarah Orlesky, Ed Tate, Natasha Stanisevsky move to this team, the in-house model. I'm just going to use that as the term now. What are your thoughts on why that is happening right now? In general, is this
in terms of hiring them, or what?
Yeah, and well, not just specifically them. Well, the fact that they have a high-ranking and well-known media and well-regarded media profile, all three of them have done excellent work over the years. I don't think there's anyone that will dispute that. But specifically, what are your thoughts on that happening?
Well, I think that, like what you just alluded to, their profile, it makes the hirings brilliant. Like, if you can bring someone that's that well respected into your organization to represent you, first off, they will already have an existing relationship with media. That's the first layer. And then the second layer is that they will already have an existing relationship with viewers and listeners. And so when you bring in a familiar face like that, it's a smart business move to do that, because A, their work is good, and B, the name recognition brings instant credibility. And so so just in terms of the hirings themselves, like, I think that if you can poach someone like that who's well known in your market and be able to bring them in and to work for your team, especially in a public facing role, that's a really good thing. And I think it's something that, I mean, it's happened in the States in other sports and in hockey a lot over the last, I don't know, and a lot is such a loose term, but I would say that it's happened quite a bit, which is also a loose term, over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think that that's something, but it's a product of the way that media has gone. And so there's less jobs, but there still needs to be jobs for these amazing, talented people to have. And this is a way to do it.
Yeah, I see. The one with Sarah Oleski is interesting to me because she is, as far as we know, choosing to leave TSN to go and work for the Winnipeg Jets. In the case of Natasha, she was laid off by Bell Media when, probably spent quite a lot of time looking for a new opportunity, and now she's gotten on with the Flames and the Stampeders. But the end result is like you say, it's of great benefit to the teams and their fan base to have a talented and very recognizable and credible person appear fronting their coverage. But in the case of Sarah, I kind of wonder, and not even just on recent events, we're talking like the last 5 to 10 years, just kind of seeing the way the industry is going. Kind of looks to me like it's an attempt to, secure her future a little bit when there's some uncertainty at where she's working right now.
Well, I mean, and who knows? Like, I mean, there could have been financial considerations. There could have been personal considerations like travel and family and stuff like that. Like, I have no clue whatsoever. But it also could be the fact that the Winnipeg Jets as an organization looked like a better opportunity for her in terms of a more secure future, like you said, Tyler, in that regard. We don't know that, but it's certainly, it may have been all of the above too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? They might have been like, here's a big check with like way more zeros on it. And she was like, okay, peace out, Bell Media. Like, no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be good for her to get the final 2 games in there with Saskatchewan, Winnipeg doing those final 2 games over Labor Day. I think that's a nice send off for her as well. It's an interesting thing that is happening, just seeing that talent going in there. And I'm curious about that. I'll be curious about how that looks. Not to get specific about who's going to get the rights here, because I think, I still think that there's a bunch of questions on that, and I don't really want to get into speculation. But it appears that there's at least 3 names in the hat. Could in Toronto, both the Raptors and the Leafs are on 2 separate networks? Could that work here in Vancouver?
In what context? What do you mean?
Could the Vancouver Canucks be on either do part in-house model, part Sportsnet, and then part Chorus, as an example?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I think the fact that they were on TV with Rogers and on radio with Bell Media shows that it's possible for sure. I'm not sure where in-house would fit into that equation if they wanted to do, like, I can't see, like, first off, they're not going to TSN TV. We know that.
No, I know.
But the fact that could the radio rights go to CKNW or B&M Bloomberg, I can almost be positive it wouldn't be on Funny 1040. But like, I really, in terms of AM properties, I just don't see that happening.
No.
And it wouldn't be on CKNW, it would be on AM 730, I would think, like the Whitecaps are and the Lions are. But I think that's within the realm of possibility, but I can't see any of those. Like, okay, so the TV rights stay on Rogers. If the radio rights move to another company like a Chorus, I think they would want all 82 games. Like, I can't at all see it being like, hey, you know what? We'll take like a 30 game pack. No problem. Like, to tell a fan like, hey, 30 games are on the radio and the other 52 are on Canucks.com. Like, why bother? Why bother doing the 30? Like, just do them all on Canucks.com. Like, what's the point? So
the way I look at it with the Leafs and Raptors is, I mean, there's a split there because of the split ownership between Bell and Rogers at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. That's really the only reason why that exists. Now, if MLSE was owned by one or the other entity, I think that all the games would be with that entity.
Yeah. I'm just curious about how that's going to work going forward, I guess. That's where that was.
And Kev, before we get, I have got one question here, and this will just tie into probably our next episode, but because it's something that you've brought up a couple times here, Kev, with playoff overtime, do sponsors and media have much sway in terms of what that looks like? Because we just saw in the World Juniors, they've gotten rid of the shootout, and it's now 3-on-3 overtime for 20 minutes, and then an intermission if needed, if it even gets there, and moving on. Do media and sponsors have the sway to potentially change that in NHL playoffs?
Change it how? What do you mean? Like
go from 5-on-5, what we have now,
overtime?
to continuous overtime now to a 3-on-3 where it's likely going to end quicker?
I think that if the NHL deal in the US didn't have the clout to make that change, then overall it doesn't. Because we know that's what makes Gary Bettman salivate, is a TV audience in the US. And not even just
and the Arizona Coyotes. Just
and not even just the TV audience, but just the US audience, period.
Yeah.
I ultimately, like, I'll be honest, I would love to see more and more sports leagues look at the streaming options of like Netflix and Prime and Paramount Plus and stuff like that. Like, I think that then you have none of those restrictions, and the money's in the bank. Like, people just pay to have a subscription to that, and it just offers so many more opportunities on top of, like, NHL Network is cool, and like having NHL Center Ice package is great, but that is all just a feed of the local broadcast. And so it's like, if that's not on TV somewhere, which, let's be honest, they all are, but if it's not, like, you don't get to watch it. So I think the short answer is no. I don't think the media has that pull. I mean, we've seen it in the US before. Like, if a game goes long, they'll either just cut it and be like, Saturday Night Live comes on, or they'll stay with it depending on what it is. And so I think that, but in terms of actually changing the rules of the game, I'm not sure that there would be that clout to say, like, hey, all of a sudden we can't have continuous overtimes in the playoffs because, media doesn't like it, especially when there's so many other there's so many channels, and like, you can move it around, and like, especially the Rogers deal in Canada, like, it can.
To me, it would have to be happening with such frequency, and you're losing so many viewers because of it somehow, that would change it. But I don't know. I mean, if I see a Stanley Cup playoff game, I flip on the TV, I come home, and it's in the overtime. I mean, I'm sitting down and watching it. Right? Like, you're not losing me because it's getting longer and longer. And I mean, I suppose if it's going until 2 or 3 in the morning, that's an issue. And in Eastern time zone audiences, that can be an issue sometimes. But we're talking a couple of months. But I don't know. I mean, the way that it is now, it draws me in as opposed to being any kind of issue losing eyeballs. So.
But that's shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah,
it's easy to attract you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
right. Like, that's the thing. And so it's like, how do you attract that fan in Raleigh, North Carolina, who knows nothing about the Hurricanes, yet all of a sudden there's a TV broadcast that's gone into like triple overtime or whatever, and they're missing their evening news or late night news or whatever it is. Like, that's the fan that you want to attract.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like seeing them trap through like 2.5 overtime periods, and then all of a sudden everybody's gassed and there's a huge mistake and somebody scores the winner. Like, that, I think, maybe is what you were getting at, Sean. Like, the fact that 3-on-3 is so exciting that, and it's going to end soon. Like, we've seen that with 3-on-3 overtime. Like, there's no way that a 3-on-3 game would go to like triple overtime. Like, there's no way.
The
players
would keel over and just pass out before it got there.
Right. So I mean, I think the conversation has probably come up. It's a fair question. Like, I'm sure that someone at NBC Sports has been like, hey, can we like shorten these overtimes somehow? Because it really messes with our affiliates and these, like, I'm sure it's come up.
Yeah. Well, I remember games that went.
There's enough traditionalists in NHL front offices, like, and I mean team front offices among the governors, that would be like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
I just remember, I can't remember what game it was, but it was in like double like overtime or double overtime, and it was on NBC, and they cut to the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I believe it was I think it was in 07, the Senators and the Sabres. I think that one they kicked it to their Versus or something. It wasn't even the NBC Sports Network back then.
Yeah.
Well, we laugh, but the Kentucky Derby gets more viewers.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it does. It's insane.
Like by far.
Yeah.
That's and decisions made.
And I mean, I know I've heard Elliot Friedman say this a couple of times that the NHL wants games at about a 2.5 hour pace. And that's sort of where I'm the one that's been thinking. I'm wondering if we're closer to the 3-on-3 overtime format in the NHL than we care to admit. And I know that we're probably more traditional. The playoff 5-on-5, but I'm wondering with that mindset that I wonder if it's coming a little bit quicker than we think. And you see that. Like that, it was an exciting overtime, that Mason McTavish play. If that was in December, that's going to be played over and over and over and over again. It probably still will anyway.
Oh,
but I think that that's still going to be that, like, there's a certain level of excitement there that might get some more eyeballs. That's what I'm wondering. But
maybe,
yeah. Well, I think the U.S. rights deals with ESPN and Turner, if I'm not mistaken. It was just the first year now of a 7-year deal. Right. So for at least the next 6 more years, as to Brian's point, that if those negotiations didn't get any movement on this topic, I think it's one you got to kick down the road for 6 years from now. And of course, we'll be into a new Canadian rights deal by then as well. Maybe at that point, attention spans and the landscape has changed, but it's hard to imagine for me that being any real discussion anytime soon.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I hope we do see a streaming service. Like, it will be interesting to see how the NFL does under Amazon Prime with their Thursday night package, because they tossed a lot of money into that package with a lot of big names in there. A lot of, like, Richard Sherman's going to be something to watch on the halftime and the pregame show. You got Al Michaels in there. It's going to be fascinating. I think a lot of leagues are going to be like, might be time to consider it. But
yeah. And I think you end up with the same, like, so you see certain restrictions with different countries and things like that. Like, I think that's all stuff, like, we already see that with some of the streaming services as it is in terms of rights for different properties and stuff like that. And by properties, I mean shows and movies. And so I think that it would be exactly the same way. Like, there's going to be games, like, if they want to control out of market and stuff like that, like it just makes sense to be able to operate it that way. And I mean, maybe it is something that the networks, like, if the next deal for the NHL is with Rogers, then maybe even more so on the Sportsnet now, like, they take advantage of that's their very own app with their programming, and maybe that's where it goes or something like that. But it's really interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the NHL or even the other sort of big four North American sports leagues ever going kind of the route of like soccer, where it's very heavily on streaming platforms, or in the case of the MLS, they're going exclusively to Apple next year? Do you ever see that in the future for hockey in particular?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think anything is off the table.
Yeah.
I think it's what we've talked about, throughout most of this show, is the idea behind, if it can generate the most revenue and keep the most eyeballs on your product, then that's where they're going to explore going.
Yeah.
And again, whether that means getting a fan to buy a ticket to go into the stadium and watch whatever it is, or buy that hat or buy that shirt, or just watch it at home, that's what they're going to do.
My last question: the Hockey Canada issues, Kyle Beach, is it having an impact on ratings / any future decisions about who's going to be a broadcaster? Are someone saying, okay, you know what, until you clean some of this up, we don't want to get involved anymore? It didn't with TSN, obviously, but
yeah. I mean, I think we've seen it with sponsors, especially, and that's the money that talks. Because you know what, if there's not a single commercial on any of Rogers' broadcasts, they're not broadcasting the games. So, excuse me. So if they don't have a sponsor or sponsors, there's no broadcast at all. Like it's so I think definitely people, companies distancing themselves from the sport for that reason. I'm sure the Blackhawks have seen it locally. Like I'm positive that there were likely businesses in the Midwestern United States, companies, and in Chicago and Illinois proper that were like, we don't want to be anywhere near the Chicago Blackhawks. Like I'm positive that happened. I don't even know for sure, but I'm quite confident to say it happened.
Yeah, it would be very surprising if it didn't.
Right. And so Hockey Canada is the same. Like there's a reason why the Canadian Tires and the Tim Hortons of the world are being like, and RBC being like, I don't know about being involved with these Hockey Canada properties. So I think that if it ever dwindled to a point where it wasn't worth doing anymore, which goes back to essentially what we saw at TSN 1040, like Bell Media said, yeah, okay, the ratings within the demographic are okay, but we're still losing money. So it doesn't make sense to do it. I think that's when it would change for sure. So I mean that the whole Hockey Canada cover up and the Kyle Beach cover up for years certainly is not painting the sport of hockey in a good light, and rightly so.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't sit here and defend and say like it was a good thing to cover that up, because it wasn't. It was horrible.
I mean, I think for me, Kevin, time will tell. Those events are still pretty recent, relatively speaking. But maybe 2-3 years down the road, if there isn't sort of a dramatic improvement in the image, towards hockey in general, but also these specific entities, then maybe that does have a trickle down effect in terms of how the games are presented and the quality of them and the platform that they're on and all of that, and who's paying for it.
But ultimately, it is about money. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
It is, and I think it's not hockey, but I think in this aspect, one sort of situation to look at is the Cleveland Browns and everything that's gone on with them and Deshaun Watson. I think that's going to be a very interesting situation to watch in regards to sponsors and media and how they handle that.
Yeah.
Well, and sadly, as we've seen over the years, like even and the situation with Deshaun Watson and the situation with Kyle Beach and what happened with those hockey players for the World Juniors, I mean, that's all worse than what Michael Vick did. Yet Michael Vick ended up being relatively accepted because he was a good football player.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think. And I think that's the point I think you're getting at, Sean, is that like there's a precedent that would need to be set. And there's a lot of people out there, fans and media, that still don't feel that hockey has done enough to be confident that things will change. And because there's a huge segment, I don't know, relative term, I guess, but there's people who think that like it's reluctant to change. It's a old boys club. Like it is all very interesting to see what effect it has on, like, some people won't care. Some people won't care. Like they'll just continue to cheer for the players they want to cheer for. Past is the past, and they'll look past it. And it's like, you can't look past it. Like you really can't. I mean, even look at how many people think that like the Chicago Blackhawks Stanley Cup championships are tainted because of everything that happened to Kyle Beach surrounding it. Right. And so I think that hockey has a lot of work to do to mend that image. And I mean hockey as a sport, because Hockey Canada in Canada is the top of the sport. Like it's the organization that runs hockey in our country.
Yeah.
Like not looking so good right now because of some of the things it's done or not done, as the case may be.
Yeah.
And so to to regain that trust and to regain that understanding and to regain that image, it's going to have to go over and above what people expect. Like it can't just do the bare minimum. Like Hockey Canada has to go like 500 times more than what it actually wants to do in terms of rebuilding that image. Because it's much more difficult to rebuild that image from something that horrible than it is to tear it down.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but you have to wonder how much Ed and Nick Olchuk, and I'll never forget Ed Olchuk sitting in that room with Rocky Wirtz snapping about the question about what the Blackhawks are going to do next. And he's sitting at that town hall just shocked, wondering. And I can't help but wonder if that was like, I'm off to Seattle or somewhere else, but I'm not with this organization anymore. I mean, we'll never know that, but yeah, it's just...
Makes me wonder too, Kev.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No doubt. So I think the short answer, that was a long answer to a short question. Yes, I think it's having an impact on sponsors and ratings and viewership for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's close it off with a little bit of hockey talk here. And we haven't had a lot of conversation because the Calgary Flames have just been it's been Brad at midnight here. Or 9 o'clock. It seems like 9 o'clock is his working hour, AM or PM.
On a Friday.
On a Friday,
Oh,
yeah.
That was just ridiculous. I was like, what? Oh, all those poor journalists who were out at dinner, a couple wobbly pops after, and
yeah. Ryan Pike out. Gotta go. Yeah. But we've seen all this action with the Calgary Flames. I mean, all of it really out of necessity. And we in Vancouver haven't necessarily seen much. I mean, we saw the free agent signings of Mikheyev and Dakota Joshua. Has it been too quiet in Vancouver? Have we expected a little bit more?
I think there was
everybody.
I think there was expectations for more, but I don't think there was. But you have to have a dance partner, and tying this back into a little bit of the leak conversations. We know that Lou Lamoriello doesn't like leaks, and we won't know that. We won't ever know the answer. What happened on draft day? But yeah, I think there was a big expectation since Rutherford took over that big changes were coming. We haven't seen that yet. So I think it is quite more quiet than we as a fan base and have expected.
Right.
It's exactly what I expected.
Really?
I dare say.
Yeah.
And the reason why is, well, first off, Patrick Alvin's a first-time GM. And the second thing is they're not magicians. Like, the Canucks have like zero cap space. And like the deal they made on Brock Besser was a tidy piece of work. Like, that was something they had to get done. He was a restricted free agent with a horrible qualifying offer. Which would have brought him to an unrestricted free agent next summer, I think, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So getting him locked up for 3 years, that's to use that cliche, is a tidy piece of business, and at less than the $7 million qualifying offer. But otherwise, they didn't have much option. Like, any money they have, they tied up. And I mean, I know that there's Thomas Drance wrote a wonderful piece today talking about how actually the Besser deal wasn't actually the best they could have made, because Drance was playing around with signing bonuses and stuff like that, and Tom has a much better grasp on that stuff than I do, that's for sure. And so I believe him when he writes that. But I just think, like, in terms of bigger moves, bigger ideas, like if this team trades JT Miller, even at the draft, for what, 11th overall or something like that, removing a 99-point player, does that make them better for next like 22, 23? Not at all. And if you're like, the idea is, well, this draft is really good, so they need to, be as bad as possible to get a top 5 pick. Professional athletes and management people don't think that way. They don't think that way. They just do not plan to lose anything ever. They plan to go 82-0. Like the Canucks right now are planning to go 82-0. Do they think they have a team that can do it? No, of course not. Like, that's not realistic. But they go into every game expecting to win. Like, their goal is to win that game. So to say, well, they should tank for Connor Bedard, sure, that'd be great if they got Connor Bedard. But you could be the last place team in the league, and we've seen it. Doesn't mean you're going to win the first overall pick in the lottery. So it's the ineptitude of the previous management still that has put this team in the spot that it's in. And the one thing that I do think, I think Rutherford and Alvin do, and Cami Granato and everyone in the organization, Emily Castonguay and you name it, they realize that this is a deeper hole to dig out of than they thought.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. Months ago I was on here saying that my prediction was that JT Miller would start the season in a Canucks uniform, and that was because of they need to get so much back to help them both now and in the future to make that trade sell with the fans, because of how much he's producing at this point. But I am a little bit surprised that there wasn't more tweaks around the edges, so to speak. But then again, the economic environment, the lack of raising of the cap across the league, other teams maybe feeling similar issues in terms of dollars and cents and lack of cap space as well. It's made it difficult to make deals just broadly.
And I think part of the narrative is missing maybe the addition of Andrei Kuzmenko, because it was announced sort of so early on, and it wasn't part of the quote unquote free agent frenzy, even though that's when he could sign. So I think they actually have done, I think, a decent amount of tinkering with what they could do. I think the expectation was the JT Miller trade, and that hasn't happened, or somehow finding a way to swindle another GM to taking on one of the bad contracts, and it hasn't happened. So,
well, it's because the bad contracts that they have are not ones that anybody wants. Like, nobody wants Tyler Myers at $12 million for the next 2 years, or Oliver Ekman-Larsson at $7.26 million for the next, like, whatever it is, 5 years. Yeah. Without the Canucks giving up multiple first-round draft picks. Like, that's what it would cost to get out from under those contracts, and those are both defensemen, which the Canucks need help on anyway. So the blue line isn't better by subtracting, OEL or Tyler Myers, because they're both serviceable NHL players who are overpaid, but they're serviceable NHL players. So would it have been better for them to go out and take the money that they gave Ilya Mikheyev to another defender? Maybe, but when you look at what the defenders were getting paid, it's like they would have had to overpay. Like, they would have paid $4 million for a $2 million defenseman, and that's not good either. So I mean, and I'm not drinking any Canucks Kool-Aid here. I just think that they were completely handcuffed in some of the things that maybe they wanted to do. And it's like, this is where, because I don't consider myself a Canucks fan. It's been, being a media member for so long has just beat it out of me. And so I try to I have this objective view, so to speak, that I think that it's just so frustrating to see that had like Jim Benning and Chris Gear and the previous management team just waited a year. Just waited a year, just like rode out. And again, maybe it came from above where like,
that's
maybe
what I think.
maybe ownership was like, we cannot pay Roussel, and we can't pay these contracts of Jay Beagle and Antoine Roussel. Like, we've got to get rid of them, and that's like maybe what it ended up what ended up happening. But man, if they would have just waited a year, those contracts would have been off the books, and they would have had so much more to play with this offseason, which I think Alvin and especially Rutherford could have made some pretty big and bold moves.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that came from ownership. I just can't see, Francesco Aquilini wanting to do that, number one. And number two, I wonder, if they were reluctant to do that, and in the midst of trying to negotiate new contracts with Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, if it looks like they're making changes to try and win in the short term, perhaps that makes that negotiation a little bit easier. I don't know. It's a very speculative, but I'd like to assume that at the top there was an interest in burning another year.
It's a good point that you say that, but it makes me wonder though. Like, there's a lot of other poor moves that Jim Benning had his fingerprints all over. Yes, so like it may have come from the top, sure, but again, I think those deals were signed in the first place, and buying out Braden Holtby and buying out Jake Virtanen, and like there was a lot of stuff there, like even signing Michael Furlan to $3.5 million in the first place. Like, he was an injury prone player, or giving Tucker Poolman $2.5 million. Like, those are all moves that the previous management group did. And maybe under a directive of the ownership, sure, but still, the owner would have had to sign off on overpaying those guys. So it's like, you wonder. But all they had to do was go one more year.
Yeah,
$12 million was coming off the books.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting. Training camp is a couple weeks away. They're starting the Penticton Young Stars tournament's back. I think that's going to be a lot of fun in Penticton, so that's going to be great. Brian, thanks for taking the time to join us. Is there anything that you would like to add / promote here? Give you the opportunity to do that.
I want to promote everything, Kevin. You know that.
Yeah, of course.
I don't have anything I want to add. Thanks for having me on. It's always a thrill of mine to talk sports media. And talk about the landscape and stuff like that. It's kind of my bread and butter. So, in terms of like my full-time job, obviously, check out the BCIT Radio Arts and Entertainment program, bcit.ca/radio. Check out what our students are doing at Evolution 1079. Just do a quick search. You can see everything from the website, social media, and the radio station itself. They'll be back on air in a few weeks, which is great. A whole new batch of second-year students. And then, my side hustles, BCHL Network is always looking for writers. So if anyone is interested in getting some experience in writing, feel free to reach out. It is specifically BCHL focused, so that should probably be an area of interest for you if you're thinking of writing for us. And then also Junior Hockey Journal is a website that I started earlier this summer with a friend of mine in Alberta. And the whole idea is that we do updates, and we haven't because I've been working at the Odlum Brown Van Open over the last 2 weeks. But we do updates almost daily on news from around the 6 major junior hockey leagues in North America. So BCHL, the 3 leagues in the Canadian Hockey League, the WHL, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec Major Junior League, as well as the US Hockey League and the North American Hockey League. So that's what Junior Hockey Journal is all about. Port Moody Panthers, our season starts in a few weeks as well. That's a Junior B League here in BC in the Lower Mainland. Odlum Brown Van Open just wrapped up. We had Vasek Pospisil, probably as the most familiar name, was in our semifinals. Lost, unfortunately, did Vasek. But he was a delight to have around. Eugenie Bouchard was a delight to have around. She and I are pretty much good friends now. And no, I'm kidding. We're I did talk to her.
I'm immensely jealous.
I did talk to her, but we're not good friends. So the tournament was a blast. It's in my opinion one of the true hidden gems on the sports calendar in Metro Vancouver. If you're a tennis fan at all, or even a sports fan, the National Bank Open in Montreal and Toronto, those are the 2 biggest tennis tournaments, or one tennis tournament in 2 cities in Canada. The Odlum Brown Van Open is the 3rd biggest. There's no other bigger tournament outside of ours in Western Canada. So that was a blast to work at. And yeah, BC Super Week. Hopefully it's back next year. And I don't know if I have anything else to plug. Oh, Elite Prospects. Go there instead of Hockey DB. That's the one thing I'm going to say about that. Elite Prospects is you won't see very many junior hockey or U18 stats on Hockey DB, but they'll be on Elite Prospects.
Yes, we know that because we've got my brother. He's on Elite Prospects from his days playing with the Airdrie Extreme with the likes
Amazing.
of
Love
Dowling.
it.
I know, it's awesome.
Love it.
And then there's the sports broadcasting course. You forgot to plug that.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I still have space in that course. It runs every Thursday night. It's online, which means anyone can attend it from anywhere. I've got a student registered. We've had students from Alberta. We've had students from Ontario. I think I've got a student this year or this term in the Maritimes, which is really cool. Considering like for that person, they'll be starting class at like 9 or 10 p.m. And then going till 1 or 2 in the morning. Or 1 in the morning, I guess. So anyway, yeah, sports broadcasting. If you just do like a BCIT sports broadcasting, it'll come up. It's a night school course. It runs for 12 weeks online. I have guest speakers every week. And the guest speakers run the gamut from, I've had Rob Williams from Daily Hive. I've had Steve Ewan from Post Media. I've had Jeff Patterson from Rinkwide. I've had, you name it, lots of different people. I've had Chantal Chand, who works for the lacrosse team in Vancouver and runs a really successful basketball podcast. Like, I don't know if anyone knows basketball as much as Chantal does. She's dynamite. Rob Fay from Nation Extreme Wrestling has been a guest as well, back when he was working with the Vancouver Canadians and with NEW. So yeah, it's really cool getting a guest speaker every week, and students can hear a lot of different perspectives from people that work in different lines of media.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Can't believe I forgot the name of what's the name of the lacrosse team that plays at Rogers Arena? How could I forget that?
Warriors.
The Warriors. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Chantal has done ringside box side reporting for the Warriors.
And I think for the Whitecaps as well. I've seen her do that too.
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot that. Sorry, Chantal, if you see this.
Thanks again, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
And then, of course, how do we follow everyone else?
I am BeardyConnect03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at Tnoble, TNOBLE.
Devin, Gordhouse09. Check out his new cat, Birdie /mittens. Sorry, had to do it. And then Chris Schneid's, SCHNEIDZ. Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. Next time, one of the questions we will be exploring is, what does Lou Lamoriello hate more? Media leaks or facial hair? Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.